Hey, it's Brad. In today's episode, we're going to be focused on my top 3 habitat projects for this coming year. Let's get started. So I launched this channel in September of 2024, and because of the timing of the closeness of the October 1st Iowa bow hunting season start date, a lot of the videos that I've been posting have been the hunts that I've been on, which is great. That's going to be part of what we're doing. But I didn't get to show you a lot of the habitat work that I did for all of last year, and some even things that went back even farther than that. And because of that, you're not fully up to speed as far as what I'm going to be working on, because of some of the things we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be building on some of those things. Now, I'm not going to be talking at great extent because I want to actually show you some of the things I've been working on, but they've been building. So that's really what I wanted to set the table for what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, before we do that though, I just want to thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the channel. And for those of you who have subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You help a small channel like mine by doing that, and gives you some opportunities to keep following what I'm doing, and really appreciate it. So in our last episode, we focused on a review of the 2024 bow hunting season. And during this season, when I have time between deer coming in, I have a lot of time to sit there and think and watch and look. And a lot of times I'm already thinking about some things that I'd like to do differently for the next year, or continuation of things that I wasn't able to finish in this previous year. So we have 3 primary categories that we're going to focus on today to give you an idea or preview of what we're going to be working on. So those 3 categories are, first of all, is equipment access. The second category is hunting access. And lastly, we're going to talk about trees. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. And my number 1 priority for this coming habitat season is to improve my equipment access. Now, what do I mean by equipment access? Well, we need to go back in time to when we were looking at this property to purchase it. We've been looking at others around the area, and for whatever reason, whether it was too expensive or it didn't fit what we were looking for, I was ultimately hoping and looking for a property that had a 70-30 balance. What do I mean by 70-30? I want 70% wooded, 30% open land. And the reason why you want that breakdown is because it's ideal for hunting purposes, okay? I don't want to be a farmer. I would love maybe to sit in a combine all day long at some point, but that's not what I'm looking to do, to invest the money and time and energy into. And here's how that breakdown works. So if you have 70% wooded and 30% open, it really has a great breakdown of deer habitat, and then an open area where you can do your food plots and other activities that allow for your access to get in and out of the property. Now, every property is different, so this isn't a hard and fast rule, but that's really what I was looking for, and really why I was so happy with this particular property. So think about it. If you go too heavy on the wooded side, you're going to have to do a lot of work to actually open up some of the areas you need, particularly for food plots and for access in and out of your property. And it's a lot of time and labor, and a lot of times it's expensive because you need some big equipment typically to do it efficiently. On the opposite side of that, if you are buying a property that is way more open and you're heavy on the open property, number 1, it's like I said, it's going to be more expensive because it's usually going to be farmland, or you're going to be pasture land for raising cattle or pasturing cattle or whatever it is. And that's not what you want to focus on if you're looking to primarily hunt deer, okay? Now, if you have some other reasons why you're doing that, that's up to you. But for those of you that are looking primarily for property for deer hunting, you're going to be not at a very happy place if you have too much open land. Now, if I'm being fair, I would say this property was probably more 80-20, 80% wooded, 20% open land, and it was parceled off a bigger property that was mostly open land, so I was very happy with this particular mix. And over the course of time, I've kind of bumped it closer to that 70-30 mix, and that's part of the reason why we do this, is because you want to get to the point where you have the kind of habitat that not only supports the deer living here or wanting to be here, but you also want to keep them here. And one of the biggest things that is going to keep them here is food. So on our property, we have a seasonal creek that goes through the entirety of the property from the north all the way to the south. And it is a great way for me to access pretty much anywhere that I want to go on the property where I currently have hunting stands. Now, is it possible that deer could be down there? Yes, they travel through there all the time, but usually down and up to get across the other side. They're not hanging out down in there. So I can count the number of times that I've actually seen a deer in the creek and while I was going down there. And you know, it isn't always going to be 100% foolproof, but for the most part, it keeps my scent down there. Visually, they can't really see me because some of the walls are so high. And so we love that about this particular property. Great for hunting, not so great for equipment access. So the way this property was set up is that a majority of the pasture open land was on the east side of the creek. And because of how the property line's laid out, I didn't have a very good way for me to get my equipment over there. I have a compact tractor, I have a UTV now, and so in order for me to really work the land like I wanted to, I had to be able to get down and up two different ditches, one being the creek. And to be honest with you, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to talk a little bit about how the land laid out. So even though I was going to be challenged with how I was going to get up and down these two significant ditches, between the ditches and from the road where I would unload my equipment, I actually had a pretty good setup. So this property, like I said, 70% wooded, 30% open, but that's not the way it was probably about 20 years ago. Now I'm estimating the time frame, but the previous owner at one point, this had a lot more open land and they enrolled it in a tree CRP program. And what that meant was they would have some assistance from the government to come in here and plant trees for a variety of reasons. People have different reasons why. Most of the time what's happening is it's to reclaim some of the open property and helps out with erosion, and honestly down the road you can harvest some of these trees. So these row planted trees aren't ideal for wildlife. Trees don't naturally grow in rows like this. But it is pretty ideal for equipment access. One of the things that we were looking at as we looked through this property was this very fact. Now, we didn't have to take down a single tree on this entire path. Now, we did need to trim up quite a bit because my equipment couldn't necessarily get through here with all the overhanging branches. But from a labor perspective and time investment and money perspective, this was a pretty easy sell because it provided us access pretty much all along the creek and got us to a good portion of our property. And so it's something to be considered when you're looking at purchasing a property. How hard is it to get access, number one, for your equipment, and number two, for your hunting access? So as we focus on equipment access, this was actually pretty easy for us to do, and we were able to get this taken care of pretty quickly. So this was one of the things that was a benefit to us. The problem is that once we got to those ditches, we had to do some significant things in order to get our equipment over. Some of the things that we were bringing over, including my tractor, were relatively heavy. So I had to make sure that I wasn't going to tip the tractor or put myself in a situation where I couldn't get out. And those are some big challenges. Some of the things that we did to overcome those challenges in some upcoming videos, and I can't wait to show it because one of them is a project that doesn't ever seem to end, but we did allow the opportunity to successfully get over to the other side of the creek. But one of the things that I'm still dealing with is erosion. All right, we have some pretty hilly areas around here, which I absolutely love. I love the fact that we have the hills here. But with that topography comes the issue with erosion. When we get a hard rainfall here, everything's dumping into that. I talked about that seasonal creek. When we get a hard rain here, it is full. It is flowing because we have so much dumping in. It's a watershed is dumping into that creek. And before it gets to that creek, there's some areas where I've had some significant erosion. One of the places that I'm working on, that I'm going to be working on, in order to increase my access. Now I can definitely get across the creek now, but the problem is that if I don't address my erosion issues, it's going to be more and more difficult. So let me show you what I'm going to be doing. I had this idea initially when trying to get across the creek, and I installed French drains. And what this is I dug a trench and I put in this 4-inch corrugated plastic tubing that's surrounded almost like in, I would say, like white packing peanuts. And then I cover that in gravel so that as the water's coming down towards the crossing, it would take that water, drain down, go into the tubing and expel it out into the creek, thus preventing it from going over my crossing. That worked okay until we had a really heavy rainfall and it blew it all out. So that really wasn't a long-term solution right there, but I'm going to utilize that at the top of each approach. And we're going to put it right at the top of the hill, because what I found is that when we have a heavy rain, I'm not worried about that creek water flowing down. I got that pretty much taken care of, but I've had significant erosion problems as we have the gathering water from heavy rain coming down the hill towards the creek. And that has eroded pretty significantly, especially when we have these really heavy rainfalls in the summer and the spring and even sometimes in the fall. So that's why I'm going to do this project, where I'm going to install several of these French drains, usually on both sides of the creek. And at the drainage, we're going to do something a little bit different there, because it isn't quite as severe, but still something we need to take care of. I'm going to do it a little bit differently here at the drainage ditch, because I have some gravel that I've put down so that when it is wet, I have no problem getting up and down both sides of this drainage ditch. But you'll notice on this side, on the south side of the drainage ditch, it looks pretty good. It's stayed intact. We've had decent rains and nothing's really happened. On this side, it looks totally different. It looks a lot more displaced. You can see some of these ruts right here. So what is the difference between the south side and the north side? Well, here's the difference. The difference is that I have an entire approach as I'm coming down to where I need to cross from the west down to where I'm going to cross that drainage ditch is literally a hill. So as that water is gaining momentum from the heavy rain, it turns the corner, because I've pretty much stopped it here with my switchgrass planting, and that's where I'm causing the issue. So I'm going to actually strategically place a couple French drains that will dump into the drainage ditch that'll prevent, or hopefully prevent, a majority of the water from reaching the north side of the drainage ditch. And hopefully it'll look exactly like the south side. All right, so that brings us to number 2, hunting access. Now, I told you earlier that one of the reasons we love this property is the hunting access we get from the creek, and that's absolutely true. We have a great way to get in and out of the property without being noticed by the deer, for the most part, and it gives us an opportunity to get in, get out, and I love it. The challenge is that I'm limited to areas that are close to the creek where I hunt, which is fine. I've had plenty of success doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's some other areas of our property that I can't get to because the creek doesn't actually go that way, particularly around our pasture area. Some of the areas that I do have some tree stands that aren't right off the creek, I always have a little bit of risk because I have to go across some areas that I prefer not to if I had a different way. And so I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, but this is what I'm working on. And so one of the things that has been absolutely great so far in some of our areas has been switchgrass. Switchgrass is not designed to be bedding. It is not designed to be food. It is designed to be a screen. So the switchgrass that we've planted so far has been kind of a mixed experience so far, and mostly it's been partly because of some of the lack of rain we've had recently, and then some of the ways in which that I've planted it or not paid attention. I'm still learning on some of this. So we have a couple different ways or areas that we're working on with switchgrass. And so let's take a look at probably our biggest area where we have switchgrass. So I have a block of woods at the back or the south end of our property that I can't really get to very easily because the creek starts moving away from it as the property goes back. And in order to get to that area, I either have to walk through some of our food plots or I just ignore it. And I've just been ignoring it, to be honest with you, because it's too big of a risk. The best way that we can access that is put in some switchgrass. Now, I've already tried once and to some mixed results. And the way I'm doing it is I have another ditch that I can go over, and we've kind of cleared a path already that we're going to use. We use the topography of the land to kind of sneak up there. And we have cleared out some trees that we haven't planted any switchgrass in yet, but we plan on doing it this year. And it's going to allow us to utilize both the lay of the land and the switchgrass to access the other side of the property. The other projects we're using switchgrass is not for our access, but it's to actually be a screen for the deer. Now, a couple years back, we did a big project where we took out, I talked about our row planted trees. We took out a couple rows of trees, and the plan is to plant switchgrass along the whole entire run of it. And the reason we're doing that is because during the spring, summer, and even early fall, it is thick as can be. And when you're close to the road, you can't see anything. The deer can't see out. No one can see in. But when you're this time of year, it is easy to see through the woods here, especially at this stage of growth for the trees. So what our plan is we're going to take this whole entire strip here. It's probably about 15, 20 feet wide, and I'm planting switchgrass along the whole entire way so that as cars, vehicles are coming down the hill, it provides a screen for the deer. And even if I ever wanted to, I could even walk down. This is my equipment path, but I could walk down it and the deer won't be able to see me very well. So that's one of the things. I still have to kill some of these stumps here, and we're going to plant some switchgrass here as well. So I'm standing in probably one of our best switchgrass plantings from last year. You can see behind me there, it is actually taller than I am, even after 1 year. I'm about 5'8", 8.5", so well over 6 foot tall just in its very first year, and it can grow 7 to 8 foot tall in subsequent years. Now, this is a great example of switchgrass planting that isn't just for hunting access. Now, I definitely use it for hunting access because I am coming off of the creek and going up to my tree stand that overlooks this microplot, and the switchgrass that's growing allows me to sneak into my stand without being seen, especially if all the vegetation is gone later in the season. But primarily, the reason I planted this about halfway around this entire micro food plot, which is less than 1/3 of an acre, is to prevent deer from seeing other deer. What I mean by that is that if there's a buck that's it's in the middle of the rut, imagine a buck is in the middle of the rut and he's searching for does. And he knows there's a food plot here because he's familiar with the area, or even if he isn't, and he's looking to see if there's does in the area. He cannot physically see across the creek into this food plot because it is blocked by that switchgrass, that thick stand of switchgrass. And so therefore he's going to have to physically come into the food plot and allow me as a hunter to have a closer and more ethical shot for that buck. One of the other places that I want to put some switchgrass is here at our new hidden plot. Now, this is the food plot where I shot my big buck this year, and I've had plenty of activity, whether I was up on the stand or down here in the ground blind. And all this wood that you see around here, it's going to be gone by the hunting season next year. These are all the logs from the trees that I took out last season. So one of the things I want to do is I want to line the edge of this access area with switchgrass. So number one, it'll hide my access to the tree stand that I have up here, but it will also hide the deer from the deer. So I think it'll really be another scenario where a deer couldn't see across the creek like we had at the microplot, but they'd have to come in here. Plus, the other thing it'll do is as the deer are coming into the area, if for whatever reason I had to have a blind, or I choose to use a blind, it'll shield that as well. So those are the areas that don't have to do so much with hunting access, but does have an impact on my ability to hunt effectively and keep the deer from seeing other deer. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about trees. We have a lot of trees that we need to take care of. And what I mean by take care of, first and foremost, we have some long dead ash trees that have been killed by the emerald ash borer. We did some work last year, but I probably have another 15 or 20 that I want to get rid of. I'm going to use these, turn these into firewood for our home, or maybe to sell or whatever, but we need to get these things out of here. They're going to be, they're going to fall eventually, and there's plenty of area here that I'm either going to leave open and put more food plot in, or there's some areas where I'm going to be doing some plantings. I'm either going to put in some maple trees or something, because I want to add some things to this area, but we need to get rid of these trees first. So there's no real time frame for this, but it is something that I want to take care of this year. It's kind of been on the back burner, and it's going to be a great way for us to utilize and reclaim some of this space. The other side of trees is I've been actively involved in plantings of new trees, and some of it is kind of the same idea with the switchgrass, is we're trying to get a border, and I've been planting some Norway spruce to varying degrees of success. Again, the first couple years we had so much drought, and it was really difficult. This last year I decided to take some plans to get some water when the creek dried up, and I put them in some of the totes that we had, and I'd actually never used any of it because it was such a wet spring and summer that I really never used it. And I had other things, because of all the water, I got so focused on other things that I really just had to let the trees do what they're going to do. And the downside of that is that because there was so much water, all the weeds went crazy, and all the native vegetation, which is we want a lot of areas, but not around the plantings of the trees we had, because they would end up competing for the water and the sunlight, and that's not good. And I wasn't able to keep enough attention to that. So we have some trees we're probably going to have to replace, but there's some that I'm hoping are going to make it. We're going to try some red cedar this year to see if that's going to be maybe an alternative. Not as pretty as the Norway spruce, don't get quite as tall, but we're really looking for screening at the edges of the property. So we'll kind of experiment there with what we've had so far. So we definitely have a lot of work to do just with these 3 focus areas this year. Now there's going to be some other things we're going to be working on, and I have some other thoughts, but you're gonna see coming up in the next couple weeks and months, we're going to be kind of going back in time and seeing some of the things that we've done so far that we're going to be building on. I do not want to waste this time in January, February, March. Even if it gets cold, I can bundle up. There's especially a lot of things that I can do with a chainsaw. When the ground isn't available to do any digging or things like that, there's still some things that I want to do to take advantage of this time. So just because this deer season is over, habitat season is in full force. And I want to encourage you, if you have some property, get out there, make some plans. Take what we're doing here and maybe you can learn from it and integrate some things into your land. I want to encourage you to get out there, get out in the woods, get out on your property, take advantage of this time when the woods are quiet, when you can see a lot, when all the vegetation is. I love getting out this time of year because you can see so much. And you'd be amazed at how much you can get done right now. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate you stopping by and watching Brad work.